stars come to play. He's the biggest of them all. Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh my goodness!
2 on the clock.
Back to another episode of the Basketball Fix podcast. My name is Ryan. I'm the host of today's show. I have with me two massive basketball experts, Josh Higgins and Jeremy Dark. Boys, how are we today?
Very good, Ryan, mate. Obviously looking forward to diving in still into these NBL25 season previews. And obviously we're getting to the nitty-gritty part of it now where we're touching on the finalists from last season, which obviously makes it a heck of a lot more interesting. But with that, obviously there's not a lot of changes, obviously, with these particular teams. So not as much to talk about, but still a lot of fun to talk about this as well with you fellas.
Yeah, I think you're certainly spot on. We are at the pointy end of these previews. But yeah, it's definitely, it becomes much more interesting. You really sort of see the stability in these top teams and the reasons why obviously they are the top teams, because they had the foundations last year and didn't have to really move around as many players. But then you also fall into that as you get into the sort of the later teams with some players moving on to the NBA and taking opportunities there. So they have to deal with that. But then there's less, I guess, swapping and changing, sort of straight line, changeable players, I guess.
Yes, and getting towards the pointy end of our team previews here means that we are almost at the start of NBL25 season. There'll be a heap of content coming your way over the next couple of months into the lead-in of the tournament, or the season, sorry. There'll be an episode about our future awards predictions, about win totals, maybe some fantasy stuff thrown in there as well. So lots of stuff to check out on the Basketball Fix moving into the NBL25 season. But before we get there, it is time for the Illawarra Hawks to take center stage. And let's look at them now kind of through the lens of last season and, recap how their season went. It was a bit of an up and down season in terms of the season as a whole, but a great finish for the team. Josh, how do you reflect on the Hawks NBL24 campaign?
Yeah, definitely a season of two halves is the best way to put it. And you could also even put it as going as far as saying that the fairy tale story of NBL 24. I think, obviously from where they started to where they finished were polar opposites. And, when you look at the statistics all around, it does show that they were a middle tier team. But as Jez and I were talking off screen, it does show that obviously the fact that their start was so poor and that the fact that their finish was so great, it really did claw them back up there as well to being a relevant team in NBL 24. But it all just really come off the retooling, I guess is the right word to sort of describe, that Jason Tatum came in with. And, you can't really call it a rebuild because it's not like he, was able to make different decisions and bring in new players and all that sort of stuff. He pretty much just had to retinker with what he had, and he worked out his ways, and he went very, very well. And honestly, they went from a team that was zero to hero, realistically. And a lot of people were talking about them as a team that could go all the way. And a lot of people said that Jason Tatum should have been the coach of the year. And it was just a really important season, I think, for the Illawarra Hawks franchise, because they've been a franchise who has been up and down. They've been relevant. They've been irrelevant. They've been, really financially hamstrung. They've had a lot of money at stages as well. It's just been a really weird sort of franchise for its whole existence in the NBL, and to finally have, I guess, a little bit of success in NBL 24 and starting to really push that into NBL 25. I'm looking forward to seeing what they've done, and obviously looking forward to seeing what they've done this off-season as well.
It must be why the Hawks kind of started resonating with me a little bit. As a Clippers fan, a franchise that's in the dumps, have no direction, bad management. I'm not a 36ers kind of, that's way too low for me, but the Hawks kind of sits nice and well. Jez, how do you kind of reflect on the season? And we've spoken a lot about Justin Tatum taking over this throughout the season. We remarked on it quite a bit. How do you kind of see back on the season for the Hawks?
Yeah, like it is just really amazing to see that transformation. And exactly with like what Josh said, he had the tools that he had, and there was no huge changes at all. It was just structure, defensive structure. I think that's what sort of improved everything the most, and he started to get the best out of the players that he had, which obviously wasn't happening when they started the season at 2-7, and then finished 12-7. So he improved with 10 wins on straight up there in relation to the amount of losses that they suffered at the start of the year. So it's just incredible. But you really sort of saw the leadership. You saw Tyler Harvey step up as the true leader of the team, if not maybe not always in performance on the court in clutch situations, which was a little bit of their downfall. But definitely as the leader, you saw that the players definitely followed him, and Justin Tatum definitely had his faith in them when you watched the press conferences and stuff after the game. So I just think, it was big, and he sort of got the most out of Tyler Harvey, and then that combination down low with Sam Froling and Gary Clark was what took them so long and so deep into the playoffs and started to sort of shock people, because that's exactly what they needed to find, and they found that perfect combination down low, and it became sort of unstoppable for them. So I think, it's kudos to him. And definitely, I think, I'm one of those people that thought that he should have got that coach of the year, because how do you turn a team from 2-7 to 12-14 or 14-14 in the end, and not get coach of the year? It's crazy, because it was definitely the coaching performance of the season for NBL 24, 100%.
Yeah, massive. I agree. And I have to apologize to the people, to yourself, Jez, and to the people watching on YouTube. My production skills went completely out the window there with a bit of camera and bottom third movement. Great. Well, let's turn our focus now to the NBL 25 season. And first, I want to look at the player movement, as we have done for all teams up until this point. Don't forget, you can check out the team previews for all NBL 25 teams here on wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Don't forget to check out the website as well. But we're looking at player movement for the Hawks, and I want to first look at who they've lost. And I think probably the biggest one, Gary Clark. Now, I know you guys have a bit to say about this one. I'll throw to Josh first. How do you kind of see this loss for the Hawks and what it'll do for the team?
Yeah, this loss is you'd nearly say it's the biggest loss, across the board in the NBL, realistically, because of what Gary Clark does. So he comes into the NBL season last year with 177 NBA games under his belt. He averaged 17 points per game, 7.8 rebounds, 2.3 assists, shot 47% from the field. Some of his big games, you look at the semi-final, I think it was in Game 2 against Melbourne United, put up 31 points and 16 rebounds. Against Cairns as well, his season high was 36 points as well. He was the only player on the Hawks team this whole season to score over 30 points in a single game. So he's just the caliber of player that he was last season for this team, really won them some crucial games. You even look at a game towards the back end of the season when they were starting to find some form, a game against Perth, and I believe it was over here as well in RAC Arena. He put up 26 points and 11 rebounds and really turned that game and that momentum back on the side of Illawarra Hawks. And, a lot of people and analytical people would touch on plus minus. And to be honest with you, a few years ago, I wasn't really a fan of plus minus. But, I think it works really well with the star players because the ball is in their hands a lot more. So when you're looking at plus minuses with Gary Clark, plus 29, plus 26, plus 20, plus 14, that was some of his best plus minuses from last season. So, I just think he had such an all-around incredible season for him. He was a guy that Justin Tatum knew, put the ball in his hand at the end of the game. He's going to hit a clutch three, or he's going to be able to drive to the basket. He's going to be able to play mate for that team as well. Him and Tyler Harvey really worked well together. And I just think that, like I mentioned before, he's the biggest loss so far this offseason. And I just think it's going to be interesting to see how they replace him, or if they just try and go a different direction and not replace what he brought at all.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. It is a shame that the league as a whole lost a profile like Gary Clark. Okay to sort of lose him back to the States if he's pushing for some more NBA time or whatever. But obviously coming to that stage maybe where he went and chased the money, and it's unfortunate that we don't have the money in the NBL to be able to hold on to stars like this. He was just like, I describe that season, I just sort of felt that Gary Clark, in that obviously that say second and third of the year when Tatum was in charge, he just became clutch. I think a lot of the time he was the guy that you wanted the ball to go to at the end if you were an Illawarra Hawks fan, because he was there, and he was also dependable the whole way through the game. You knew if you needed points and the momentum shift was in the favor of the opposition, put the ball in Gary Clark's hands and see what he can do, because he often sort of shifted the game back into the Hawks' favor. And then just his presence. I think having a player in your team that is the caliber of Gary Clark, it makes you play better and it lifts his teammates, and you have that confidence and you're willing to maybe take some more risks yourself. So I think that's going to be a major thing that they've lost if they go down the path of not replacing him with another sort of big profile import, because it is that presence that he brought, and then his ability to lift the players around him. That's also going to be missed for the Hawks 100%. And just that back end of the season, like I said, it was just he just improved so much, and he was just so influential for Illawarra. So yeah, it's a huge hole.
Yeah, huge hole indeed. Justin Robinson, another player that they have lost this season. Jez, you're on a roll, mate. Let's hear your angle on what this means to the Hawks.
Yeah, well, I just think after he was a buy back in NBL 23, and then in his first game tore his meniscus in his knee, and then watched the whole season. So he came from with pretty good pedigree and had a lot of potential to be an amazing player in the NBL, but it just sort of felt like he never really got back to those same numbers that he was putting up back in the States and in the minor leagues overseas. And then, got injured and just sort of never really got there for the Hawks. And they needed that other alternative scorer. They needed another guy to work with Tyler Harvey. They needed another assist man and another player to sort of stretch the perimeter constantly. And I just don't think that they got that from him in the end. He just didn't his last season, he averaged just 11 points, 2.8 rebounds, 4.4 assists. I think they just needed somebody else that could maybe produce a few more points and a few more assists, and maybe even get in there and add a few more rebounds as well, which he just sort of failed to do. And tearing your meniscus and you're out for a whole season was obviously a major injury, and it is hard to come back from that when you're sitting on the sidelines for 8 months. So it's understandable, but I think it was definitely time for the Hawks to move on.
Yeah, and with obviously Justin Robinson, I think it was, I think there was a bit of good faith, I guess, with obviously him sticking around for the entirety of the NBL 23 season, as well as that off season as well. But statistically speaking, last year it was a weird season, because these stats on paper aren't really that bad. So 11.8 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, and 4.4 assists. So it's not horrible in terms of what an NBL world is. Our top players are averaging 20 points per game. So, put that in correlation, it's not crazily bad at all. We had a season high of 26 points in a win as well, late in the season as well. But I think where the Illawarra Hawks found their form was when Justin was moved to the bench. So he was moved to the bench in round 17, and he started up until that point. Now, through the last 11 games, including their finals run, when he was on the bench and started on the bench, they won 6 of those 11 games. Now, he started one game in that one, and he actually lost that game. He had a very bad plus minus. He had a negative 19 plus minus in that particular game where he played 31 minutes. So when he was playing, he was relatively good, but it was more when he was coming off the bench. So, again, we're touching on some plus minuses. He had some good pluses of, plus 17, plus 17, plus 20, plus 14, plus 9, and they all came off the bench. But if you look at the start of the season, and again, it's obviously a direct correlation to obviously losing a few of those games, but even when they were making some charges as well, plus 19, plus 12, and plus 11, negative 19, negative 12, and negative 11. So, it was really a tale of, I guess, the same with Justin Robinson's, with two sort of storylines, the starting Justin Robinson and then the coming off the bench Justin Robinson as well, because I think where they struggled last season was the fact that they picked up two of the exact same imports pretty much in a way with Tyler Harvey and Justin Robinson. So not great playmakers, more of scorers. Tyler's a bit more of an outside scorer, whereas Justin Robinson's more of a mid-range sort of driving and attacking the basket sort of scorer as well. So I liked him coming back because he showed a lot of promise in the preseason of NBL 23 and obviously that first game as well before he went down and got injured. And he showed glimpses this season again as well with what he can be. But we'll touch on a guy later on who they've replaced him with, and it's just a way better replacement because they get a bit more of an all-around player rather than just being a little bit of an inside threat and a mid-range threat as well, which Justin Robinson was last season.
Yeah, that was kind of like my question to you. Like, was the reason that the improvement came once he was moved to the benches, they had too much of the same thing on the court at the same time? Is that kind of the way you think about it?
100%. Yeah, I think so because, a guy like Tyler Harvey, if we look back and, the guys who have been following the NBL for some time know the pedigree of play that Tyler Harvey was. So only 4 years ago, he came into the league, averaged 20 points in his first season of an NBL, sort of season, which was incredible. He was up there as an MVP candidate. He slowly diminished, though, once Jacob Jackomas took over from Brian Goorjian. So, you looked at last season, I think he averaged 15 points per game over his entire season. If you look at early on in the year, under Jacob Jackomas, there was some 3-point games, some 5-point games, some 6-point games, really, really low scoring numbers. But when Justin Tatum took over, I should say, he really started to explode again onto the scene as well. And I think it was really in correlation with obviously Justin Robinson going to the bench, Harvey being that number one, I guess, scorer at the guard position, and just having a bit more free range on offense as well. So, it's a good problem to have, obviously, with a guy like this who can, go for 26 points in a game coming off the bench. But yeah, I think it was just obviously a direct correlation with obviously, both of them playing a lot better when they weren't realistically playing a lot of minutes together as well.
Yeah, very interesting you say that. Just as you kind of both have alluded to earlier on in the piece here, that it's all about the structure and how to get the pieces to work together, which was kind of the improvement that we saw from the Hawks last season. And that kind of shines through all of that we've just said in the last couple of minutes, or you guys have said in the last couple of minutes. Another play we probably won't dwell on too long. We have spoken a lot about him over the past few weeks. Is AJ Johnson signed for the Bucks, the next star? I have a bit of a thought about this, and it's not so much AJ Johnson as a player, but the concept of next star. We spoke about this just briefly prior to getting online here, and for the Hawks, I think it's necessary for them to have a next star. The franchise has been up and down throughout the years, financially, organizational wise. They're not on the Adelaide 36ers kind of level, as we mentioned, but they have been on struggle street for a while for a team that was quite successful back in the day. So I think a next star, just from my financial standpoint, is imperative for this team moving forward, and I hope they can get one on board before the season starts. But I'm not confident of it. Josh, how do you kind of see them losing AJ Johnson? Will it make a difference to the team, and how do you kind of reflect on them possibly not having a next star coming into NBL 25?
Yeah, it's definitely a downer as well. And when we touch on the Next Star program and its inception, the first player who was, I guess, the biggest name in terms of Next Stars was LaMelo Ball. So he was an Illawarra Hawks player. He realistically brought this team, I guess, to the forefront of the NBL world in terms of, the season before that, no one was really watching their games. And then you bring LaMelo Ball in. It wasn't just Aussies watching the games. There was international viewership. There was, some really big crowds that were being drawn to these games purely based around LaMelo Ball and the Next Star program. So I think it's obviously imperative to what they're going to do, going forward, I guess, in future seasons, because it is exciting to have some fresh talent on their team and obviously developing as well. But as well, though, it's really tough because Justin Tatum as well had a great relationship with AJ Johnson last season, and he was a reason why he stuck around. AJ was a reason why Justin, I should say, stuck around in the offseason, eventually took up an assistant coaching role, and then obviously made the jump to the head coach. So it's going to be interesting, though, because you look at this team on paper, I think they're sort of in the window to really compete for an NBL championship. So if I'm looking at it as the next star, it's like, yep, great, 100%, looking great in terms of being competitive and having a chance of winning. But they've got a lot of strong pieces in a lot of strong spots in this particular team. We're going to touch on a little bit later in terms of more of the depth chart. it would have to be a certain position and a certain player, obviously, to fit into this team to make an impact. So I'm more thinking a scoring small forward, power forward sort of versatile player. So they're very hard to come by because, again, though, they're such a raw talent. And I think as well, it's still going to make sense for the team and the player coming in that, hey, this is the role that you're going to play. Are you happy with that? Yep, you are. Okay, perfect. Let's sign up and do that as well. So it's definitely an interesting one, I think. I think they definitely are a team that would benefit from it. But like I've been pretty, I guess, strong on in the preseason, and obviously when we had a chat a couple of weeks ago about some of the thoughts about making the NBL great again, I prefer to have these sort of younger, talented players in sort of stronger franchises with a lot more money and a lot more backing, because I think they get a bit more exposure as well to not only just winning games, losing games, but a strong fan base as well. What are your thoughts, Jez, mate?
Yeah, well, I just think Illawarra put themselves in some way in a little bit of a peculiar position because of the situation with AJ Johnson not playing so much. He was after obviously to go there to build up his stakes in the draft, which didn't seem to hurt anyway because it felt like the Bucks obviously had their eye on him. But yeah, sort of only averaging 7 minutes a game isn't something that these next stars particularly want, especially in their draft year. So you wonder if that's maybe what's hurt the chances. But then it is interesting to hear that with his relationship with Justin Tatum and what they had. So they maybe did have an open dialogue, and it's something that doesn't obviously feed through to the rest of us. So I don't know. I think it is really important. I think it'd be nice to see like all of the teams have next stars, but as you said, they've got to go in the right positions, and they've got to. It's obviously something that helps project their career, their personal career, and not necessarily something that is so beneficial to the team actually on the court. Or am I out of there a little bit? You sort of look at Alexander Sarr, and he was also a pretty strong bench player for Perth, which we'll get into when we get into Perth's preview of next season. But it just feels like a lot of the time that these guys can be sort of fall into these places where they're not going to get time and not going to be so influential for the team, and then struggle to get the minutes that they're craving in their draft year.
Yeah, no, definitely. And one more player that I want to touch on now, he may not be, I guess, the biggest name in terms of the NBL world, but I think he's due for his breakout season. So he's going to be coming into his 4th NBL season. Illawarra haven't signed him just of yet. So I think there's been an open dialogue between Illawarra and this particular player. Now I'm talking to Barley Bales. Now, I'm going to give you his stats from last season, and no one's going to be overwhelmed by the stats. 1.8 points per game, 0.6 rebounds, 0.8 assists per game. But he came on late in the season and really started to, I guess, pick up the best offensive player on the other team at the point guard position. He did a really good job on Bryce Cotton, really good job on Jalen Adams last season. Nathan Sobey at the end of the season as well held him very low in terms of points as well. So I think he's going to improve out of sight. And now we've got a little bit of stats as well to put through. Now, the offseason, obviously, with the NBL 1 competitions, he's most recently played for the Sydney Comets. Now, this is where I see his development starting to come. Now, he's another small point guard in the NBL. We know the NBL loves that sort of player as well. Here are these stats, boys. 29.8 points per game, 9 rebounds, 5.6 assists. So unlucky, wasn't even mentioned as an MVP finalist last season in the NBL 1 for the Sydney Comets, which is crazy. But I think he's one that we can lock for coming back into the Illawarra Hawks team personally. And if we're touching on Supercoach and fantasy, he is one of the biggest locks in my team for this up-and-coming season. So, we're not going to get a 30-point-per-game scorer. Don't get me wrong, guys. We're probably going to be looking at a 6 to 8-point-per-game scorer who's going to come in and really, I guess, ruffle some feathers. But I think he's one that in terms of if he does decide to go elsewhere, it's going to be a major loss because he is going to turn into a really solid role player, maybe even a solid starter one day in the NBL. So I think he's a Sydney boy. He originally started at the Sydney Kings before making the move last season to the Illawarra Hawks. And I just wanted to touch on him because he's due for a massive season, I think, for this team. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in NBL 25.
Brought up in Redfern, actually. Born in Brisbane, brought up in Redfern, so definitely has
pedigree.
Tough skin on his nose.
Well, you heard it first here. The Oracle Josh Higgins has once again call out another player. I'm not taking the bet on this one. But a lock for Supercoach, as you heard here first. Now, let's turn our focus, guys, to the players they have signed. Not a massive list here for NBL25 for the Hawks, but still a big name in Trey Curl. Jez, how do you see Trey Curl coming into this team under the coaching of Tatum, and what role will he play for the Hawks this season?
Yeah, Josh alluded to it earlier. He's a massive signing, probably one of the biggest signings, I think, of the year. If you're looking at off-season movement, especially within the NBL itself. We touched on it a little bit in the Adelaide preview and how important he was to Adelaide, especially at the back end of the season. Like, you look at his numbers for the year for Adelaide, and it was 17.1 points per game, 5.3 rebounds and 3.6 assists. But Adelaide weren't really in the competition at all until sort of after Christmas. And that's when he really stood up. He averaged 21 points, 7.3 rebounds and 3.8 assists. So you see the sort of the big improvement. What was it? Say 4 points per game and 2 rebounds per game improvement when Adelaide started to play well and do their small little push for the final. So I think it's a huge signing. He's played 3 years, or this will be his third year in the NBL, playing for Southeast Melbourne first. So it'd be nice to sort of see him. Like, I think we talked about it last episode, where you've just got a certain amount of these import players that really make a name for themselves in the NBL, and he could certainly be one if he can sort of settle here now. I think it is a perfect fit, especially with Tatum and working with Tyler Harvey. It's going to be a really, really interesting combination, and could probably be one of the best, say, 1-2 scoring combinations in the league. I think, because if you can get a little bit more space for Harvey, I have been a little bit critical, but it just sort of felt like he was trying to do too much, trying to be that guy too much, and maybe forcing a few more shots. And if you've got a guy like Trey Kell that can also put up, 20 points a game and get in there and get you rebounds, you're going to spread the floor, and there's going to be a bit more space for Harvey, and we might see the best of him again. Like Josh said, when he come into the league, he was averaging 20 points and was an MVP candidate. So the caliber is definitely there for Harvey. So this trade is not just about, all right, getting the most out of Trey Kell. It's getting the most out of Tyler Harvey. But for me, the only sort of criticism I have is you're still looking for that playmaker kind of guy. You're getting 3.6 assists, but it sort of feels like maybe they could have gone for someone that is going to move the ball a little bit more. But I don't know, Josh, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of the playmaking part, I'll touch on that first, that you just mentioned there, in terms of maybe not getting what they thought they were going to get, maybe. But when you look at him last season, so he had a triple-double last year against the Illawarra Hawks out of all the teams. So he had 16 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. He also has had multiple 7 assists games, multiple 6, multiple 5, multiple 4s, and 3s as well. So I still think you're going to get a solid playmaker out of Trey Kell, and I think when we saw the best of Trey Kell last season, and it's been highly publicised and reported on, that the Adelaide 36ers under Scott Ninez, when he took over from CJ Bruton, made 2 key changes. Now, the first one was making Isaac Humphries the key point on the offensive end, and then the second one was making Trey Kell the full-time point guard. So I think that does show you that he's ready for the challenge, and obviously is more than capable of being a really strong playmaker. But playing devil's advocate here, this sort of worries me in a way. Now, I don't see him as a direct sort of player to Justin Robinson, but they've got very similar traits. All right, I think Trey Kell's a little bit more of a better scorer. He's a little bit more of a better rebounder, but very similar on the sort of playmaking sort of pathways. Now, I think personally the best Tyler Harvey that you can possibly get is a player who's going to be able to have the ball in his hand, run up the court, run off a couple of screens, and then shoot a couple of shots off the screen. Yes, it's not a conventional way of scoring, or, they don't even look that great, but you give him the free rein when he's hitting those shots. And I think that's the biggest thing, obviously, with Tyler Harvey. He looks great when he's making them, but there's obviously massive stages where he doesn't make them. So I've got my questions with Trey Kell. I'm not sure if it's going to work as well as a lot of people are saying. But in terms of name value and what he can produce in the NBL, it's definitely a major signing because you lost Gary Clark and obviously brought in Trey Kell. So I just think it's going to be interesting to see how they sort of work this rotation. Is he a 1 or 2? Is he even playing as a 3? I just think there's a lot of questions right now, obviously, for this team because I still think they're obviously one import signing away from obviously, completing their roster, and they've still got a next star available as well. But it's just going to be very interesting to see how they fill that last spot because I would have preferred them to go out and assign an established power forward or center right now and then move Tyler Harvey back to that sort of point guard role and then bring in an all-out shooter. So I'm not sure. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all works. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they do go towards the end of the season like the Tyler Harvey, Justin Robinson, one starting, one off the bench, or, really stagnating their minutes against each other so they're getting most out of both the players. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I'm definitely interested. It's definitely a major signing, don't get me wrong. But in terms of the playmaking side, yep, he's definitely got that. In terms of the scoring side, he's got that. I just have questions because in his first season in the NBL at Southeast Melbourne, it wasn't the best season all around. So he finished with 12.4 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, and 2.9 assists. So very solid statistics again in the NBL. But sometimes he does get a little bit hungry, and it's all about him. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Don't get me wrong. I hope it does work out for the Illawarra Hawks because if it does work out, it's a genius move. But again, though, it's always a bit of a query when a player is onto their third team in 3 seasons in any particular league, and especially the NBL as well.
Yeah, I like it, to push back a little bit. I think that it could be a spot where you have Tyler Harvey coming to a certain point in his career now and sort of realizing, all right, maybe he doesn't have to be the number one. We talk about it a lot when we're discussing imports, and obviously there's another level of ego often to not to categorize or whatever, but it is an issue, and it is something that does come up in conversations all the time. And maybe at this point it's like, okay, Trey Kell could be brought in to be that number one guy, and Harvey's going to use his experience and his knowledge to play a different role, and that's why Kell's going to be that starting point guard, which he was in Adelaide. You talk about, say, his first season, but there were being sort of a little bit mediocre. He got better when he moved to Adelaide, and now he's got to get better again if Illawarra are going to be an actual contender for NBL 25. So it could be sort of a perfect fit, but exactly like what you said, we're missing the point here of, hey, they're missing a direct replacement for Gary Clark, because I don't think that Trey Kell is in that same sort of category. Obviously, different position, different type of player. It's not you need a player to replace Gary Clark, and maybe there was the whole saga. It sort of felt like that he was a possible chance to return, and now all of a sudden it's put Illawarra on the back foot of chasing a high quality import. But there is definitely some players out there that could potentially slip into that position. But obviously it's tough. We're getting down to the final stages. But if you can make a signing quick, it feels like a lot of the imports have just started to arrive back in Australia, coming back to their different teams. So you're not too far behind the 8 ball, especially if you've got someone that's maybe been playing in Europe or, getting their minutes up somewhere else over the off season. So it will be interesting to see who they can bring in to be that actual official replacement of Gary Clark.
Yeah, you made a good point there as well about obviously maybe just saying that Trey Kell is the number one guy. And I wonder if that has to do with anything with maybe Gary Clark not coming back at all, because it's very interesting because if you had, say, Trey Kell, Tyler Harvey and Gary Clark in the same team, they're all going to be high usage players to somewhat because they all need the ball in their hands to create and to obviously be able to score as well. I think Tyler Harvey's probably the best guy that you could put in a corner and just shoot every time you get it. But I still think, like you mentioned there as well, with the egos, it's an interesting point for sure. And again, like I said, I hope it does work because he's a tremendous talent to have in the NBL. But yeah, I've just got my queries on it right now. And obviously with it only being their major signing as of this point of recording, we are going to scrutinise it a little bit more, especially with some of the players they've lost so far in this NBL season.
Well, definitely a lot to speak about there, even though the signing numbers at the moment are quite small. Now, guys, let's look forward to the NBL 25 campaign on the court. We touched a little bit through this kind of the last 20, 30 minutes about what they were kind of missing and what they maybe needed to replace. But I'm really kind of want to drill down now and find out what do they need to be successful. They were kind of a mid-range team by season's end. You look at all the statistics, pace, rebounds, plus minus, all of those things. They're mid-table in everything. How do they make the jump now with the squad they have to be successful? Josh, I'll throw to you first, mate.
Yeah, I think I've got my own little thoughts about this, and I'm interested to see what Jez and yourself, Ryan, say about this. But for me personally, I think now that they've gone and signed Trey Kell, they've got their two ball-dominant players with Tyler Harvey and Trey Kell at the 1 and the 2, or the 1 and the 3, or however they're going to sort of figure that out. I think now they've really got to go and sew in a centre. Now, I think Sam Froling is an amazing player, and don't get me wrong, he has got all the characteristics to take the next level and the next step, and he can start to knock down the three-point shot. He's a very solid player inside. He's a double-double threat most nights, but I still think they just need that strong body inside. Now, I've got three names here in which I guess you can sort of either take as that's who they should be going after, those three particular names, or just think about the play styles of those three players. So I've written down Alan Williams, Tyler Cook, and John Mooney. Now, Alan Williams and Tyler Cook are very similar players. Tyler Cook last season came in as an injury replacement for South East Melbourne, played preseason games, played 3 games in the regular season for South East Melbourne. The third game he went down injured. He did average 13.3 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 1 assist. Now, one thing that Jez mentioned to me before, and I'm not trying not to steal your research here, mate, or your thunder, but Tyler Cook is also a former high school teammate of Jason Tatum, Justin's son. So that could be a little bit of another fairy tale story that obviously they get to come back together and obviously, coached by a teammate's dad and all that sort of stuff as well. But I think that's the sort of play that they need to go after. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they're sort of looking at going, hey, Lachlan Aldrich has had an amazing season in the NBL 1. Sorry, not in the NBL 1, in the New Zealand NBL. He's just won the MVP over there for Canterbury Rams, averaged 20 points, 12 rebounds, 3.3 assists. Maybe they're sitting there going, maybe let's see how this pans out in the offseason. And then we may go and attack a small forward who can score, like I mentioned earlier, who can sit in the corner and just knock down shots. So it's going to be very interesting because I think their biggest needs realistically right now are more just getting some scoring players. I think a little bit more size, a solid playmaker, a leader, all that sort of stuff. And I think they've addressed a couple of those problems with Trey Kell, but they've still got a massive void left there by Gary Clark. And, when you're touching on a guy who's, a near double-double sort of averaging threat, sort of small forward, power forward, it's a massive hole that they've lost. And, he was one of Justin Tatum's favourite players last season. So, yeah, I think they've done okay this off-season. But, yeah, Jez, what are your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like it's, I guess, come to me right now in an epiphany. All we've talked about is offense with the Illawarra Hawks. And maybe that's where the problem lies. And that's maybe where their off-season hasn't particularly gone as well as it would have or could have or should have. Or maybe when we're talking about, bringing in someone to replace Gary Clark, bringing in someone to a small forward to score points, maybe it's someone that they need a better key defender. They need someone that can stop the opposition, that can lock down, or because especially at the start of the year, they were having major problems. They were just like off the top of my head, it felt like they were allowing their opponents pretty close to like 100 points a game in that first sort of period. And obviously that came down a lot once Tatum took over, but it's maybe something that we're missing in, I guess, our analysis here is, okay, how is their defensive structure when they've got in Trey Kell and you've got Tyler Harvey, and that could be what they're missing. They might be looking for someone that's another really strong defender, someone that's going to get them the rebounds they need, be that cutoff guy at the point and be able to stop players like all of these fast small forwards that are dominating the league in Parker Jackson Cartwright and Bryce Cotton, of course. So it might be something like that they might look to bring in, obviously, if Aldrich works out and can do the job. Maybe he's not going to be the best power forward down there, but if he can do his job, maybe they look for something like that instead.
I like that. I'm going to give you one name, boys, that if you are going to go down that route, this may be the name that they go. He's a former Illawarra Hawk, former Sydney King, played in the NBL before. Keep an eye out for Justin Simons. So for Illawarra in that season, 8.5 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 1.9 assists, and 2 steals in that particular season as well. So yeah, he was brought over and he came into the league saying, "Hey, I am the cotton stopper." So it was a pretty outlandish statement. He did get torched in one of those particular games. He did do well in one of the other games, but yeah, maybe that's the sort of play that they need. And again, like we've sort of spoken about, and you bang on there, mate. It's realistically trying to figure out now in this preseason, what do we need? And they've got to sort it out quickly because, yeah, the imports get over here in August. That's the time they're required in Australia to be starting their preseason camps. So realistically, if they haven't signed someone by, early September, it's going to be quite rough in terms of bringing somebody in a week or so before the finals, flying them to Perth, and then getting them to learn all the systems very early. So they need to get onto it quickly. And obviously we need to wrap this one up as well pretty soon as well.
Yes, well, let's then get on to a off-season grade. Before you boys give us your final kind of word, the grade on the off-season of the Hawks, if there's anything you kind of want to reflect on in whether they've had this successful off-season, if they've managed to kind of hit those targets they would have themselves had on their big whiteboard in the Hawks front office, let us know about that. Jez, I'll throw to you first, mate. Let us know if you think they've hit their targets and then your final grade for the boys.
No, I think 100% we could say they haven't hit the target in one major aspect, and that is replacing Gary Clark, and that could just be the timing of it. But I think definitely they brought in someone that can help Tyler Harvey and be that other, aggressive shooter. But yeah, still some question marks, I think, around their off season, but their off season isn't complete yet. So I'm going to give it a big B minus. Trey Kell, I think, is a great signing, and I'll hold on to that and think that it has been successful in that aspect. But yeah, there is still some holes. So, but they have the space to fill it. So we'll see in the end.
And then, Josh, what are your thoughts?
I've sort of gone a little bit, different to obviously Jez. I think it's been so far a failed off-season because they may go into this season leaving it a little bit too late to bring an import over. And we saw what happened in Perth when Perth brought over Christian Doolittle literally 3 days before round one. Their start of the season absolutely tanked. And I think for this team to get going very quickly in the start of the season is very important for their finals chances and their obviously playoff push as well. So I think in terms of what they've done or the lack of what they've done so far, I've given them a D minus in terms of the fact that they've only signed the one player. Now, they go out and sign a power forward or a center very quickly. This will change substantially and be pushing itself up to where you've got it currently, Jez. But yeah, I just think they've left too many holes, especially too late in the off-season. And for them to be any chance, they've got to have a red-hot start this season because a lot of teams have gotten better. And even the teams that were below them last season have gotten better as well. So, yeah, D minus for me, boys.
Yeah, I'm on a similar aspect. I think they haven't moved the needle extremely high, but they haven't kind of tanked out either. So I'm going to give them a C. I don't think they're just, again, the holes, as you've spoken about, especially with Gary Clark, that is a major hole, and they still have time, but the signing of Trey Curl is great. They haven't moved the needle substantially for mine, and they're mid-table. They're mid. That's all kind of they're throwing at me over the last couple of weeks and months here. Now, guys, that kind of wraps us up for the Illawarra Hawks. Next episode, we're going to touch on Josh's little babies, the Perth Wildcats.
Let's go.
Yeah, a lot to talk about.
The Pussycats.
The Red Army, baby. They're going to be on us if you don't talk good about them, boys.
We've been giving Josh a lot of stick off air about this upcoming episode, so make sure you catch up on that when it drops on your podcasting platforms, on YouTube or on the website. Josh, how do you find us on the socials?
Yeah, make sure obviously you check us out on whatever your streaming service is, The Basketball Fix. If you want to get up some more information and more news as well, check out our website, www.thebasketballfix.com. Check us out on Instagram, The Basketball Fix Podcast. Check us out on YouTube. And obviously just keep up to everything that we have got going so far, because the season is coming in thick and fast, and there's a lot going on in terms of all of those platforms coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for hanging with us today. And that is your Basketball Fix.
When stars come to play, he's the biggest of them all. Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh my goodness!